Good evening. This is the Dean of All Things Spicy from Conjured Vapors Peppers, and I'm here to do a little video on how to raise your tolerance. So, many people out there love chilies. They love the idea of chilies. They just don't have the ability to eat them. Or they can do a little bit of spice. You know, they may go to a Thai restaurant and say, oh, I'll take medium hot, or, things like that. Tolerance is absolutely raisable. And in my experience, it was somewhat easy. But as my wife will tell you, anything I do full force and all the way, right? I don't make anything easy on myself. I never have. But anyway, so pretty much the majority of my adult life, I've grown jalapenos, serranos, habaneros. But about 5 years ago, I went to a nursery and I found a reaper plant, a scorpion pepper plant, and a ghost pepper plant. And I thought, wonder if I can grow those. I didn't know if I could, right? Um, so I bought them, grew them, and they grew beautifully. And I was like, okay, so what about eating them? Yeah, I can't eat these. At the time, I had a tolerance that I could eat about 3 jalapenos. And then that fourth jalapeno would just light me on fire, right? Unless, of course, you got that one rogue jalapeno, which happens to people all the time. So I decided to intentionally start raising my tolerance. And what I did was I knew that I had a tolerance that was about 3 jalapenos. So what I started doing, and it cost me a little bit of money, is I would go to the store and I would make sure that I would eat 3 jalapenos every single day. And then once 3 jalapenos became easy, what I would do is I would go and eat, sorry, these are big jalapenos. I would go and eat 3 jalapenos and one serrano every single day. Let me turn the light on so maybe it's a little easier to see. I just realized this video might be dark. Sorry. All right. So I would eat 3 jalapenos and one serrano every single day. And then when that became easy, I moved to 3 serranos every day. And then eventually that became easy. And I would eat, juggling peppers, 3 serranos, and a Thai pepper every single day. I didn't really know what was between the serrano and the Thai pepper. There's a huge difference between these two peppers, but I didn't know what was there. I do now, but I didn't at the time. And these are things you can find on a regular basis in most grocery stores. You may not be able to find the Thai pepper in most grocery stores, but if you go to a Korean market, a Vietnamese market, a Chinese market, you're going to find these, right? So then once that became easy, I went to 3 Thai peppers every single day. And again, eventually that became easy. And then I would do 3 Thai peppers and an orange habanero. And eventually that became easy. At that point, I went to 3 orange habaneros every single day. And then eventually that became easy. And I would do 3 orange habaneros and one red habanero every single day. Then eventually that became easy. I went to 3 orange hubs every day. And then eventually that became easy. And I went to 3 orange habaneros and a pepper that's right around a ghost pepper level, right around 1,000,000 Scoville. And eventually that became easy. And I went to eating 1 million Scoville peppers every day. By the time you can do 1 million Scoville peppers every single day, you're doing phenomenally well. And you're able to then test yourself on some of the hottest peppers out there. A million, it's a lot. It's massive for most people. But there are people out there who can't do it, right? So then eventually, I would go from 1 million to something that was around 1.3 million. And then eventually, I would go from something that's about 1.3 million to something that's about 1.8 million. And so this is the way I raised my tolerance. But I know that won't work for everybody, right? So some people, they're like, 3 jalapenos every single day. You're insane. Well, there's a way to fix that problem too. So if 1 jalapeno is too much for you, then what you do is day one, you eat a slice of a jalapeno. And then if that lights you on fire, then the next day, you eat another slice of jalapeno, about the same size. I guarantee you, you do that for 4, 5, 6, 7 days. It might take you 2 weeks. But I promise you, at some point, that's going to become easy. And then what you do is you go to a slightly thicker piece of a jalapeno. And you eat that on, day one of your new tolerance. And then again, on day two of that higher tolerance, you eat the same thicker slice of a jalapeno. By this point, you've probably raised to the point where you can eat 1/3 to a half of a jalapeno. And then eventually, you do that for 3, 4, 5 days. Then you're going to get to a point where that's easy. Then you're going to take, 3/4 of a jalapeno, and that's going to be your daily consumption. Then you do that for 4 or 5 days. And then you get to the point where you'll be eating the whole jalapeno. And you do that for 3 or 4 days. And then one day you're like, wow, I'm eating 3/4 of a jalapeno. And There was a time when I could only eat a slice. So then you try for two. And these are peppers that you can find at just about every grocery store, right? Sometimes you go in and they're not good, so you don't buy them that week. Or you just shop around. You know, then after you're doing two a day, that becomes easy to move up to three. You know, these peppers are cheap. I bought all these peppers today from the grocery store because I don't tend to grow these peppers anymore. I do grow jalapenos, but mine are jalapeno hybrids or interesting varieties like a lemon spice or a pumpkin spice. I don't tend to just grow regular jalapenos anymore. So I didn't have any to show you, so I figured I'd go to the store and buy them just so I could show you. Then, eventually you're like, I want to try a Serrano. Let's try a Serrano. So you try it. My God, it's just scorching, right? So the jalapeno, somewhere between about 3,000 and 8,000 on the Scoville scale. A Serrano is usually 10 to 20,000 on the Scoville scale. So you're a little trepidatious. You're at 2 jalapenos a day, and you're like, I don't know if I could go that high. So what you do is you go ahead and you buy yourself some Serranos. And when you're eating the pepper and you're trepidatious, eat this part of the pepper. It's not going to be nearly as hot as this part of the pepper. So I've shown in the past. I don't know if you're new here and maybe haven't seen my videos in the past, and maybe you haven't seen me describe this. But when you cut open a pepper, the white stuff that you see in the center, the spongy white stuff, is called the pith, also known as the placenta. And the placenta is where the capsaicin oils reside. You can see that up at this part of the top of the pepper, it's very thick. And as it gets closer and closer to the tip of the pepper, it becomes thinner and thinner and thinner. Now, Serranos are one of the reasons I think that they're so much higher than a jalapeno is because they have a thick placenta running down the majority of the pod, right? But still, notice the open air down here. Notice the space between it. Here it's soft. Up here it gets harder and harder and harder. So these are also underripe pods. When you are eating jalapenos, Serranos from the grocery store, the corporations that grow them have specialized and hybridized and then selectively grown to have longer lasting jalapenos, longer lasting serranos. So they'll actually have a shelf life in the store, right? So they pick them extremely underripe and they ship them in the store and they come to you green. But jalapenos, serranos, they're really red peppers. You're just seeing the green underripe version. And that's what the American society has built their peppers around, right? So you get to the point where you're like, I just don't know. Serranos are hot. Then what you do is you get a serrano and you just eat the bottom half. Just the bottom half of the serrano. Do that for 3, 4, 5 days. And then you can get closer to the stem and eat the upper half of the serrano. At this very underripe green stage, jalapenos, serranos, poblanos, all these annuum type peppers, they have a very grassy flavor. Everybody knows that jalapeno flavor, right? That's a grassy flavor. Not grass, but a grassy flavor. And it's become a well-known flavor in America. But anyway, you do that upper half of the serrano for 3, 4 days. And then eventually you go on and you eat the whole serrano. And you eat a whole serrano for 3, 4, 5 days. And then eventually you move on from the one serrano, and you eat 2 serranos every day. Until that becomes easy. And then you do 3 serranos every day. Now let's say, hypothetical situation. You get into that half of a serrano. You're like, oh my God, that is way too hot. My body's just not used to that. My mouth's just not used to that. Then what you do is you go and you try to find some Fresnos. They're harder to find, but they are available in grocery stores. I found this today at my local grocery store. So then you do the exact same thing. Again, you eat the lower half of the Fresno pepper. You do that for 3, 4, 5 days. And then eventually you eat the upper half of the Fresno pepper, right? And then you move on to eating a whole Fresno every day. Eventually that becomes easy and you go to 2 Fresnos every day. When that becomes easy, move on to 3 Fresnos every day, right? And then you'll be able to graduate to the Serrano. Once you're done with those Serrano peppers, And the serranos, 2 or 3 serranos, becomes an easy task. Your mouth is no longer going, ah! You're like, now I know what Dean was talking about. Those do taste grassy. Then you go find yourself some Thai peppers. Or something in between, right? Like a lot of the macadam varieties, which you'll never find in the grocery store unless you're in Peru or Guatemala or Honduras, El Salvador. Then you can find some macadams. They tend to be in the middle, somewhere in between that serrano and that Thai pepper heat level. Here in America, in the grocery stores, Thai pepper is going to be that next higher pepper. And Thai peppers are a huge jump, right? Serranos being anywhere from 10 to 20, 25,000 on the Scoville scale. These tend to be about 100,000 Scoville, right? Maybe less, 75 to 85,000, right? But they can get as high as 100. So what I do is I think about that higher level. The whole time I was raising my tolerance, I thought about that highest level. And I told myself, this is what I'm consuming, this is what I'm consuming, this is what I'm consuming. And it works. Once you graduate from that, if you need a grower that can get you some peppers that are somewhere in between that serrano and that Thai pepper, reach out to me. I know plenty of growers out there. I'm one myself. And most of us have peppers that are sit somewhere between that serrano and that Thai pepper, because a lot of us love to snack on those, right? There's a pepper called a sugar rush stripey. They're usually, I don't know, somewhere between 20 and 30,000 on the Scoville scale. So there you go. Delicious pepper that's higher than a serrano. Then after you do that, you move on to like a sugar rush peach. My sugar rush peaches tend to be anywhere from 65 to 85,000, which are just below the Thai pepper. You do that for 3 or 4 or 5 days, and then eventually you move on to this, the Thai pepper. You just eat a little bit of it. It's going to be a little spicy to you, but that's okay. The next day, you eat just a little more. That same exact amount. And then the next day, same exact amount. Then eventually, you're eating a whole Thai pepper. Then eventually, you're eating 2 Thai peppers. Back in that day when I could eat 2 to 3 jalapenos, when I ate a Thai pepper, oh my God, my mouth was screaming hot. It got to a point where it's not that bad anymore. Then eventually, 2 to 3 Thai peppers are not going to be hot enough for you anymore. So then what you're going to do is you're going to go onto the orange habanero, somewhere between 150 to 350,000 on the Scoville scale. And so this is where the challenge truly begins, right? And this is where a lot of pepper seekers, heat seekers, pepper eaters, people who are chasing the spice or raising their tolerance, you get to the point where they stop at the orange habanero. Here's what I was talking about with the placenta and the pith. Up closer to the stem, this is going to be a much, much hotter part of the pepper than down here at the tip, right? The reason why so many people stop at the habanero is because it's a different kind of burn. So this is where you're first getting into the chinense family. So everything I showed you previously was an annuum. Macadams usually lay somewhere in between, which is a completely different family. But then eventually you get into the beginning of the chinense family. So this pepper, and a lot of the orange peppers in general that are in the chinense family, they attack your tongue. It literally tastes or feels like you're getting stabbed in the tip of your tongue, right? Needles, pins and needles on the tip of your tongue. And that's a painful burn, right? So what you do is you just bite a little bit off that habanero. And then the next day, just the same little bit. And the next day, the same little bit. Until you start to get used to that stabby feeling on the tip of your tongue. You eventually will, I promise. I'm at the point where I can eat 30 of these, 50 of these. And it's don't get me wrong, it's a little warm by then, but there was a time when I couldn't even do one, right? So once you graduate from those type peppers, and then you move on to the orange hop, and you eat a quarter of an orange habanero every day. You do that for 3, 4, 5 days. Then you go on to half of an orange habanero. You do that for 3, 4, 5 days. Then you go on to the whole orange habanero. Do that for 3, 4, 5 days. Then you move on to 2 orange habaneros. Do that for 3, 4, 5 days, and then you move on to 3 orange habaneros. If you want to, throw in a fourth. And just enjoy the pepper. Eventually, that burn that used to stab your tongue no longer does. But you don't get scared by that. You just go on and you enjoy it. I promise you, your tongue will get used to it. With persistence and practice, tolerance is absolutely easy to raise. Man, I remember how painful that experience was the first time I ever ate an orange habanero. I get why so many people try it and they never go past it because it's a painful burn. It's not to me anymore. Habaneros are a snacking pepper to me now. But there was a time when that was hot, right? But you just get past it. And if the stabbing on the tongue is a little too much, move on to something a little hotter. You know, some of my crosses. This is a Roxa orange peach. I was talking about using this to talk about a ghost earlier because it's very similar in shape and color to a ghost pepper. But this rock's orange peach that was crossed by a bee with something that I don't know what it was sits around 6 to 700,000 on this global scale, which is a lot hotter than a habanero, but it's a different burn. It's not as painful of a burn, right? But you get to the point where those 3 orange habaneros or 2 orange habaneros every day are no longer killing your mouth. Don't get me wrong, the whole front of your mouth is going to be a little warm, but eventually you're going to get used to it, and it's not going to be painful anymore, right? So then you go find some red habaneros, which usually sit somewhere between 250 and 600,000 on the global scale. And the same thing, you just eat the tip. Then eventually you eat half. Then eventually you eat 3/4. Then eventually you eat the whole pod. And then someday, 3, 4 days, 5 days later, try 2 red habaneros. Then you go on to 3 red habaneros. Then if you're really brave, you go on to the 4th red habanero. And then eventually those red habaneros aren't even that hot to you anymore. Don't get me wrong, they are. They're a little bit more of a whole mouth burn, right? They're not just the stabby on the tongue. They still have the stabby on the tongue, but it becomes a whole mouth burn. Then reach out to me. Reach out to another grower, Find something that's somewhere between 500,000 and a million. And then, again, just eat the tip for a few days. Then eat half for a few days. Then eat 3/4 for a few days, then a whole pepper. Then move on to 2 or 3 or 4. This is where you're going to start getting into the floral peppers. Up to this point, peppers are sweet or citrusy or fruity. But right around that 600,000 Scoville scale, that's where you're going to start getting peppers that taste floral, like a flower. To this day, sometimes they call it perfumey. I used to say it's like drinking my grandma's old Avon bottle. And that's what it tasted like to me. That's what I thought it tasted like, right? But eventually, it becomes so easy. And, here, 5 years later, I'm actually getting to the point where I like the floral flavor. But eventually, those 600,000 to a million Scoville scale peppers, you're getting up to the ghost pepper level. You eat one of those a day. Eventually, that becomes easy. You go to 2 or 3. Then you want to find something a little hotter, something around 1.3 million, like this California Reaper. With enough searching, with growers, with enough practice, you'll get to the point where that's easy. Then you have 2 of those a day, or 3 of those a day. Then eventually you move on to something that's like 1.8 million or above, like my evil avocado cross that I've been working on. By this point, I have a tear. But the fact is, tolerance can be raised. It's all about slowly and steadily working your way up that scale, right? 5 years ago, 3 jalapenos lit me on fire. What is it today? October, it's almost the 20th. Just under a month ago, I ate 77 7-pot primos in one sitting. The hottest pepper in the world that you can get your hands on that is rated, officially rated, by an organization, right? There are much hotter peppers out there. But one of the hottest in the world, still to this day, one of the hottest in the world. It's not, but it's one of the hottest. It's the hottest that's been officially rated that you can get your hands on. Guinness shows the Pepper X. Supposedly, it's an extremely, screamingly hot pepper, but you can't get your hands on it. You can't get your hands on the seeds. You can't grow it. You can't eat it. So how do you know? Tolerance goes up. All it takes is a little practice, a little work. If you want it, you'll get it. That's my tutorial video for the day. This is the Dean of All Things Spicy. I hope you have a beautiful night. I hope you have a beautiful journey raising your tolerance. Have a great night. I'm out.